Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
As a friend of mine would say, Mally Davis on his YouTube channel, now look at this, he'd get really excited. Mally, that's a terrible impression of you, isn't it? But really, I've started the photo walk this week and immediately I've got a really lovely, contrasty, light day, some beautiful sunshine on an otherwise quite crisp day. I've set myself a challenge today photographically. I'm going to try and make all my images portrait orientation. They're always landscape, so today I'm going all portrait, and I've got immediately in this beautiful, bathing in this beautiful light, some trees and what have we got? These are firs. So F11, 250th, ISO 800. There we go. A shot to start the day. And welcome to the photo walk. Today's story within the photo walk has the following strands, really. Self-belief, determination, the ability to find a level of will and strength you otherwise might have not thought part of your everyday core, I would have thought. A couple of weeks back, I got a letter from Nils Armelinks, which you'll be familiar with by now because I read it one week, referenced it the next, and then by this week, well, I'm going to, with his help, tell you his story more thoroughly. There are now two quotes that sit at the bottom of my computer screen. The first one comes from a film, Valentine Davis in 1947, who wrote the following words for Miracle on 34th Street, the book, which then, of course, became the film. And I like to believe they were Valentine's words. I'm not sure that because I haven't read the book, I've seen the film, that perhaps these were actually penned by the screenwriter, but all the same, they're fantastic. It's I think it's a powerful mantra. It's the moment when Kris Kringle, talking to a non-believer, is talking about the subject of faith and the existence of Santa Claus, and he says, if you can't believe, if you can't accept anything on faith, then you're doomed for a life dominated by doubt. Such a powerful sentence. I've tried to use it myself from time to time, but in all honesty, it does not sound the same coming from me as it does from, say, Sir Richard Attenborough in the film. Well, I suppose only Morgan Freeman would do it justice, I've no doubt about that. And then I have another quote now that is more recent, because that one has been up on the computer screen for probably well over a year now, but the more recent one comes from Nils Armelinks, my guest today. He said, I may not be able to add days to my life, but I was determined to add life to the remainder of my days. To quote a little from the letter Nils sent to me a few weeks ago, at the age of 30, as an otherwise fit and well individual, I was diagnosed with advanced bowel cancer and given no more than 5 years to live. Well, we're now 4.5 years into this turbulent journey with endless cycles of chemo, 7 rounds of surgery and a bout of radiotherapy. But I'm pleased to say that despite the odds being stacked against me, I'm still here, still smiling, but most importantly, it's made me rediscover my love of photography. And that photography is allied closely, I would say, with his sheer passion, devotion for an utter love for cycling in some of the kinds of places most of us will only really ever see on websites or read about in photo books. And I speak with some pretty amazing people on this show, and I have to say I think my life is richer for having spoken with Nils Armelinks.
Today on the Photo Walk.
I don't really want to kind of waste my time staring at a little phone screen, which, you know, us millennials find ourselves doing all the time. And I thought, you know, actually photography is a great way to kind of like look up and look around and take in your surroundings, but also notice the small kind of little nuances a little bit more, like, you know, textures, lines, shadows, light, all of that sort of stuff.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today Nils Armelinks shares his incredible and inspiring photo story. It's a very different type of photography show, recorded as we walk with our cameras and the mailbag making pictures and sharing stories, and hearing from former guests with snippets of inspiration, including Bert Stefani, who went from pro and camera ambassador to making pictures only for himself. But why? And Adrian Villa looking for fog in Madeira. Also a snippet from one of our patrons and photographic teachers, Jim Solos, who gives his younger self some important photographic advice. Tell you what to expect in our letters too in a moment. More about our important patrons too later. My friends at mpb.com are also very precious to this show. They are the #1 platform in the UK, the US and Europe. They have bases in Brighton and Brooklyn and Berlin when it comes to buying, trading and selling quality used kit online. They help photographers like you, like me, to tell our unique stories by giving us a safe place to buy and trade and sell that kit that we've used and we no longer perhaps need, but we know it needs to go to another photographer's good home so that perhaps we can trade into something we really need. So sell the kits you're not using, trade it in for the kit you need to create. Buy used, spend less and get more. Go to mpb.com. So a truly inspirational photo story today, and also from your letters, the importance of making personal pictures, even if you are pro. Is it time to think about making drone pictures? What happened to my drone and the tree? Your photographic plans for 22, my own too actually, a dream weather gift for one of our photographers, 365's shooting architecture and more. Shall we walk then? Coffee and Garibaldi's packed, check. Boots on and laced, check. Warm walking pants, check. Spare batteries, check. Film and cards, check. Earbuds in, check. Lens caps off, let's walk. So yes, this week I'm giving myself a challenge. Challenge portrait. Normally all my pictures are shot landscape orientation. It's the way that I make my pictures when I'm working professionally as well. I mean, we see landscape, don't we? And most of my life is spent, well, professionally at any rate, trying to make documentary style pictures. They're really all landscape. But today I'm going to try and shoot portrait orientation, which brings about its own challenge because I brought out an X Pro 1, and the one lens that I have today is a 12mm wide Samyang, and it's a beautiful sunny day, it really is. Still chilly, still nippy, but beautifully sunny. So I'm going to make sure that I, because of the wide angle, the sun behind me, I don't get caught in the shots all the time, because that's the danger always with a wide angle on a sunny day. It's great to get your letters about where you're walking with your camera, and of course getting your pictures too, which I will share on the show page. If you've never been to the show page before, now is the time to go have a snoop. We've got some terrific pictures this week. We really have some very strong pictures, and Niels, our guest, has shared some images from his incredible cycle rides as well. So please be sure to go to all the W's, photographydaily.show, then the episodes tab, and have a look at the page. There's some links as well to films that are mentioned within Neil's interview today as well. And we're going to start this week with Steve Weller, who's well, I think he may have reignited my passion for the casual drone shot. I underline casual because I did, for a little while, not long, for a little while, I did work professionally with a drone. I had my license, I'd done my test, I'd got my ever so expensive insurance, and I did some professional drone work, but not for long, because the red tape, in the end, the red tape overtook me really, and I sort of lost the will with some of it, even though it obviously made sense, particularly I suppose in places where I did work, places like Adam Brooks Hospital, where I had to go and film I know this is not going to sound it's not going to sound particularly interesting, but believe me, it brought its own challenges. They had a state-of-the-art car park, and my job was to go and film as if I were a car, I suppose, within the car park, going up the ramps. Now, some of these ramps were round, so ascending a round ramp is, I tell you, that's a pretty tricky manoeuvre. But shortly after, really, and the fact that I stacked one into a beech tree, when I was practicing for another particular job, I kind of lost my enthusiasm for it. But anyways, we're starting with Steve Weller. And a Photowalk letter, which would be spot on. It is spot on, really, for our guest today. Niels may well have cycled this mountainous area that Steve has written about. I shall have to ask. Morning, Neil. Hope you're well. Enjoying life as a new dog father. I am. Barney is doing very well. Well, he's sleeping better in the night now. I know this is not a dog podcast, so I won't bore you with the detail, but we did start with him. I know you're going to look at me now over the top of your spectacles and say, Neil, what did I tell you? We started with him in the bedroom. Because on day one, his eyes, come on. He looked at us saying, you're not going to leave me down here, are you? Really? No. Come on, let me upstairs. And we did. And there he stayed until one night he practically pushed me off the bed. And that was the moment where he said, this can't go on. So he's downstairs and he's making his voice felt. But he's getting better. He is getting better. I thought I'd drop you a mail about my recent photo walk, says Steve, or scramble as it turned out to be. January is always a quiet month for us wedding photographers, and it's usually a time when we recharge our batteries. Lately, with more time available, and from listening to your podcast, the enthusiasm has come back to get out there once again, to photograph life and landscapes. Now, it's always helpful to have two dogs, because you have to get out walking twice a day. So armed with doggy bags, treats, two enthusiastic dogs, and my Fujifilm X100V, good lad, I've been exploring the South Wales countryside, capturing the beauty that it has to offer. As working photographers, sometimes, Steve says, we forget to stop and look and just take in the world around us. And getting back out photographing landscapes has helped my mental and physical well-being. Now, walking two dogs on a lead, and especially one of them being 38 kilograms, that's not a dog, that's a horse. Sometimes it's not that easy to just stop and take a picture as you're getting pulled left, right and centre. Sometimes it's like going for a walk with your kids and telling them to stop fighting continuously. So I've started exploring areas with the dogs and then coming back to them on a different day. Just myself and just the camera. On one of these days, I decided to return to I had to look this up because I wasn't sure the pronunciation. BWLCH, which I think, having watched a couple of people say this on films, it's the Bilk mountain area, which is a 10-minute drive from my home. You're very lucky. So I started looking through this area. I thought, that's Photowalk material. For years, you'd never need to leave it. So there's a famous mountain road, says Steve. Yes, there is, which has been photographed many times, but I wanted to capture my own vision of this iconic road. On this particular day, the sunrise was about 8:05 a.m. So I hopped out of bed, 7 o'clock, grabbed some food, coffee, jumped in the car, took the short drive up the mountain. I had in mind the exact picture I wanted. So this time I took along my Canon R5 with a 28 to 70 millimeter. That's the one that packs that huge megawatts, isn't it? And he says my DJ Mini 2 drone. I arrived, parked the car and surveyed the scene, realizing that for the shot I envisioned, I had to get a much higher viewpoint. So camera, tripod and drone in hand, I started the steep climb, eventually reaching the point where I thought I'd be able to capture the sunrise over the mountain ridge. Standing there, breathing heavily after a steep hill, watching the sunrise and capturing the exact moment made it all worthwhile. Going on photo walks, says Steve, capturing landscapes and life around me has ignited a spark in my personal photography again. And I believe this has also made me become a better photographer in my work life as well. So, says Steve, stay creative, be mindful, never stop looking. And I think Steve's absolutely right. There's no doubt in my mind that taking these photo walks myself, which prior to the pandemic, of course, I wasn't doing this kind of program. I think it's made me see the lights differently. It's made me see views differently. It's made me see landscape differently. It's made me appreciate, well, particularly now, woodland. Love woodland. So thank you, Steve. He's got a personal Instagram feed, which I will share on the show page today, and I'll pop it with Steve's pictures on the show notes page for today's episode. Glorious pictures, and that one from the drone, just great. As I say, I think you sparked my my desire to make some drone pictures again. So, shall we play some inspirational words from former guests and now patrons? It's going to be a patron for the first one, because this piece of inspiration, well, this speaks to me in a large way, following Steve's words about personal photography being really important and powerful. And in Steve's case, that's, as you've just heard, it's supported and reignited his passion in terms of, well, making everyday photographs and getting out there with a camera, because it's too easy, and I can say this as a professional myself, that it's too easy to put the cameras down after a day's work and think, great, back in the bag, recharge them, leave them there to the next time somebody passes a cent, dollar, pound or penny across my palm. But actually getting out and making photographs is so important. And I found that with this, with the woodland photography and where I am today. I love it. I mean, I'm not necessarily forest bathing today, but I'm certainly bathed in the beauty and the just sheer excitement of trying to look for a picture. So a couple of weeks ago I spoke with Jim Solos. Now, Jim is a patron of the show, just as you can be too. And we'll talk more about that later on. And I've started doing digital drop-ins with the patrons. And I think it's been quite successful. It's been fantastic. And I've been recording some parts of our conversations, because we have some patrons. Well, patrons are all around the world with all kinds of experience. Some of them film, some of them digital, some of them full-time professionals, some just extremely keen enthusiasts, and proudly so, proud amateurs. But all with a story to share. And I've been asking during these digital drop-ins fairly random questions. And the question I put to Jim, who's a trainer, and he teaches photography, and his film work is absolutely sublime, it really is. But the question I put to Jim was, if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice on the very day you picked up a camera initially, what would that advice be? Jim's words of advice that you're about to hear wouldn't necessarily be what Steve Weller would give to himself, I'm sure. But whoa, were these thoughts aligned when it came to getting out in the great outdoors and embracing making pictures for passion?
I'm hesitant to say this because I know I don't want to offend anyone. I know there's people that want to do this for a living, but speaking for myself personally, my number one piece of advice would be, don't do it for money. Do it for passion, do it for enjoyment, but don't turn it into a job. Years ago, working in my profession, I was working in a very busy teaching hospital. And in addition to my regular job within the hospital, I found myself shooting weddings. And I shot over 120 weddings over a period of 3 years, in addition to my regular 8-hour-a-day job. And it killed my passion for photography. I put my camera away, I walked away, and I never touched it again for 10 years. And I learned from that, for me, photography cannot be a job. It makes picking up the camera work. And so I need to keep it as for enjoyment and leave it at that. Some people, I love when I hear about people that can maintain passion in photography and have it as a job as well. But that's not me. I can't do that.
Jim Solos, who I am making rightly Patron of the Week, I think. And I will, of course, link to his work on the show page. Photographic goals for 2022. I think we've actually, haven't we nearly covered, I think, all these? I don't know, Neil. I don't do the paperwork. Do you think so? Yes, I think we have. Maybe there's one other sitting in the file. But here's one from our good friend Hannah Gimblett. Lovely to hear from you, Hannah. Hannah's had a tricky 2021 with the ME that she suffers. And of course, we talked about that on the the show before. She writes, "Dear Neil, 2021 was certainly an uphill struggle for many of us. I'm very much hoping, though, for better and brighter times in 2022. In terms of photographic goals, well, there are a few that I have in mind that I've been mulling over. When I'm well enough, I'd absolutely love to create and print a zine. I have a couple of project ideas that would be fantastic to pursue." That's a good idea. There we go. One firm idea in there waiting for a tick, Hannah, on that one. A zine, okay. Second aim is to push to print my images much more for home photo albums, print swaps, and hopefully also for the website. Print swaps, great idea. Actually, I am in a print swap. It could be a book swap, I'm not sure. Print or book with Jim Solos, who we mentioned a moment ago. I think the idea of print swaps and book swaps is fantastic. But above all, says Hannah, my true aim is to continue to work on my passion and to pick up a camera every day, even if that's to simply work on composition or capture the dynamics of light and shade in our photography. Of course, being completely bedbound restricts me a great deal in day-to-day life and with what I dream to achieve in terms of photography. But nonetheless, I continue to have that spark inside me to create, despite the difficult circumstances. So, to work around this is something that I certainly will strive to do. Be wonderful to hear your 2022 goals too, Neil. Best wishes, Hannah, from Hannah Gimblett Photography. Hannah. I didn't really share mine, I know. I was a bit nosy, wasn't I? I wanted to know all about yours and then didn't share my own. I'm always more interested in yours, of course. But, since you ask, photographic plan then is to launch this blinking new website at some stage. The old one has stopped working properly, and it's still working well for me in terms of the contact page works, and I get to hear from people, but I can't blog anything. I can't really put any new pictures up for fear that something will break. So yes, the new one, and the new one's going to show more breadth of work, not simply weddings. I'll unashamedly show my food photography and portrait photography and commercial stuff, and I'll build on that for a long time. I heeded the words, and I probably also repeated the words of peers that said, do not share commercial work within in the same space that you have wedding pictures, because some people in the corporate world will not take you seriously. And of course, that for me, that was kind of a shock horror statement. Won't take me seriously? All right, well, I'll heed that advice. And I suppose as I've got a bit older, I've thought, well, no, I want to put up what I want to put up and show what I want to show. And if somebody has a problem with weddings being alongside some pictures that I enjoyed making of food, well, let that be their problem, not mine. And as I do get older, as I appreciate so much more, partly due to those who I talk to on this podcast, it's not about what you photograph. It's about how that photograph makes you feel. And whilst that could sound dangerously like Jerry Maguire's final mission statement, I genuinely believe it. So there's that. And also I want to stop more people to make street portraits, or at least ask. I meet so many folk, actually, definitely out on these walks. Not today because I'm in private woodland. If I come across anybody today, it'll be a poacher. No, I mean, like a couple of weeks ago, I met a woman who was walking her. I can't remember the breed of the dog. I really can't. But it was like a huge fluffy thing, and her opening gambit to me was, how old do you think I am? I hate that opening gambit because you can never get that right, can you? I mean, that's the question you don't want to have to answer. So after we'd sort of circumnavigated that one, she was telling me about this fantastic bundle of fur, which turned out to be a Russian dog, and it even had its Russian chip. It was chipped in somewhere in Russia. So yes, I was joking how she's probably got an oligarch's dog who'll be coming back for it. But so we had this long conversation. Then guess what I forgot to do? You guessed it right. I didn't make the picture. So that's it wasn't for fear of asking. It was just that I got so caught up in our conversation. And then, of course, yes, the podcast. More of this, more retreats, and I'm going to start doing some single-day Photowalk days as well. Maybe we'll try some forest bathing. Forest bathing, Neil, what is forest bathing? Since we've mentioned it. It's the Japanese practice. It's a process of relaxation known as Shirin. I'm going to get this wrong, aren't I? Shirin-yoku. That sounds better. The simple method of being calm and quiet amongst the trees. I learned this from Lynn Fraser, one of our super patrons. So there we go. Life sorted. Well, you did ask. And one from Karagarda in Denmark land. And I think I can mention the season just gone with a few days of January left. And they play nicely into the pictures that I will share from his Photowalk on the show page today. And I love the simple idea for the pictures I'm about to tell you about. Hello, Neil, says Kara. Hope you and your family had a good Christmas. In Denmark land, we were blessed with a rare white Christmas this year. And on Boxing Day, I went to the St. Stephen's Day service in my parish church, which is located inside the Citadel in Copenhagen. I brought along a camera, and after the service, I went for a walk on the ramparts. Blue skies, frozen moats, crowds of locals, tourists all out enjoying the sun. Sounds glorious. But then wait. A few hours later, a thick fog rolled in from the sea. I grabbed 2 cameras and hurried back out to the Citadel, which was now an entirely different place. A dampened, almost monochrome landscape with figures moving quietly through the cold mist. So I made a new set of pictures, and I've combined the photos from my 2 St. Stephen's Days walks in pairs. Same day, same view or subject, completely different atmosphere, side by side. It never ceases to amaze me how much photography depends upon light and weather conditions that's completely out of our hands. Of course, this is an essential part of the charm of making pictures too. It becomes a skill of its own to predict the changing of the light, the movement of the clouds, the position of the sun, and in your case, the mist, the fog rolling in. And they are fantastic pictures. They really are. And I tell you what's also interesting. I don't know, this must be planned, I'm sure, but when you compare the 2 pictures, which you'll see on the show page, it's almost like you waited for the same amount of people to wander into the shop, because they really do mirror each other in all kinds of ways. Best wishes, Karagard. So thank you, Kara. Good to hear from you. And I think for some inspiration after that, a man who is used to walking through fog, from episode 276, it's Adrian Villa. His pictures online and in his YouTube videos sing with the fog and the mist that he captures. And here he is talking about one special trip that he made to Madeira just to capture the fog in one particular forest. He went a long way for this. Bit of a pricey risk, of course.
But yeah, in this trip I did take a plane. I don't usually travel or do photography this way. I usually go somewhere and just try to find something. But in this case, I did go to Madeira. There is a tiny island in the Atlantic that belongs to Portugal, just to go to this forest, because I had seen photos of that place and it looked like super beautiful and something that I would really enjoy photographing. I went there for 8 days, so yeah, I drove quite a few hours, took a plane, and then get there. I was hoping to get some fog, and that place, because that forest really comes alive in the fog, in those weather conditions. It's supposed to get foggy very often, but it's always a risk, as you said, because you never know if you're gonna get those conditions or not. And I think I was patient, and I was just waiting there for days and days until I got it. And that was like something magical happening, and that's what I live for with my photography, for those moments, because they are really, really worth it.
Adrian Villa, who I'm sure has a fog and mist radar. Isn't it wonderful to hear somebody so passionate about the conditions? We'll talk 365s in a moment. The sunshine that we had right at the start of this walk It's all gone. It's a bit like Callah's mail now, that the conditions have entirely changed. But I'm standing opposite a forest. I want to get a picture of this. Let me get one for my sketchbook. It's really thick forestry behind the tree that I'm going to take a picture of. A few weeks ago, I went to Sherwood Forest, and I was kind of disappointed by how thin much of that forest, well, the bit that I was in anyway, was. And of course, forest management would dictate that. But this particular private woodlands, this is very different. It's very thick. I mean, if you walk into the forest here, I'm going to have to think about a higher ISO for sure. What am I on here? 1/2/5 f5.6. Manually focusing as I'm using a manual lens, and there we go. One for today's sketchbook. So let's talk 365s, shall we? Our one's going well. Our community 365. Which is on the website. Go to photographydaily.show, then of course click onto the tab that is the Community 365. A couple of recents: Jason Fang in New Zealand, the wonderful trees in your backyard. Jason, you are so lucky. And frankly, it looks like you live in a rainforest. Beautiful, in a movie. 147, Zishan Khan's fantastic rain-swept coast off New England. I've just moved you across the world. New England, with those 20-foot waves. And 142, Alan Beach on the beach. Beach on the beach. I'm sure you haven't heard that one before, Alan. With the sun setting behind the famous Sea Low Lighthouse, which is a wooden structure on the beach in Somerset. It makes some fantastic pictures. I've seen your images, of course, of this particular, I'm going to call it a monument. It is really, isn't it? Before. And so thank you to those that are sending them in. And the point of our Community 365, as I've said every week, is that if you want to do a 365 but you're thinking, I'm not quite sure I can keep up with this every day, then you can join in with our 365, which gives you an opportunity to send in what you see from wherever you are in the world and be a part of a Community 365. Send them in to the email address, which is studio@photographydaily.show. 2,000 pixels, please, on the long side. And that's the same address for sending in pictures to the show generally, with your letters as well about where you're walking. So studio@photographydaily.show. I am going to walk into the forest. I am. If I'm not out in a week, come and look for me. Right, Chris Goddard, on the 365 tip, one of the 3 Goddards, he says, but with less cause for a sword. I've been listening to the podcast for the last year, says Chris, and also got my brother and dad into it as well. Kind of the opposite way of how I got into photography, as it was my dad and brother who inspired me to pick up a camera. This year, the 3 of us are sharing the load of a 365. It's on Instagram, @3Goddards, the number 3, numerical 3, GODDARDS, and of course I'll put that link up on the show page anyway. With my dad living in the south of England, myself in the north, and my brother living in Florida land, in America land, it should have a great variety of content. You're right, it does. Our only rule is that there needs to be at least one photo posted from at least one of us per day. Really enjoy the podcast. Let me know if you fancy a photo walk and interview in Cheshire land, England land. Of course I do. Cheshire, would love to. I think this summer, amongst the weddings and the commercial realities of stuff that I'm doing photographically, I'm definitely going to spend some time on the road doing some photo walk days. And Cheshire land, wow, say no more, invite accepted. Thanks, Chris. Right, time for part 1 of our guest this week. You've heard the backstory that Niels Armerlinks has, and I'm really pleased that he said yes to a chat atop his letter into the show, which by the way, he didn't see as some sort of mechanism in which to appear. It was purely that I was so moved by his words that I invited him to take part in the show and share more of his story. So yes, this is in 2 parts today. We'll start with his life story and his life so far adventuring. Then in the second part of the interview today, we'll bring that life story, the sport, the sheer spirit for making legacy. We'll bring that all together with the photography, making these huge hill and mountain climbs to make these, well, truly remarkable pictures. So this is Nils Armelinks. They make them tough, it would seem, in Belgium. I feel very, very guilty today because Nils, I know you're looking out the window thinking, I would rather be anywhere but talking to Neil, because you've got the perfect cloud base today to cycle not just into it, but above it. But you're here talking to me, of which I can only apologise.
That's fine, not a problem. Glad to be here.
So tell me about this cloud base that you're missing today, because usually this would be perfect for you, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, obviously, kind of given my conditions, I'm a bit of a sucker for kind of like, looking out for the best possible kind of like weather conditions and really trying to capitalise on it. So when you can, see that there's going to be cloud inversions and you can probably get above it, it gives you this kind of weird kind of like outer world experience. You sort of feel like people are in a different world to where you are if you're above it. And, when things work out with work, if I've not got too many work commitments or, treatment or hospital appointments, it's really fulfilling to find like a group of friends and to get above it and to kind of capture, that kind of like mountain light where it just looks so different. It's beautiful. I love a cloud inversion.
Well, the only times I've ever burst through the cloud, well, there's two really. There's jetliners, and there's always something amazing looking out the aircraft window, isn't there? And you think, wow, we're coming through the clouds. That's a fantastic feeling. But equally, when I've been skiing, and I've been lucky enough to be on a range where it's really high, and you travel through the cloud to get there. What does it feel like when you come out the other side of a cloud on a bike?
Yeah, I suppose there's always that kind of unknown whether or not you will actually get through it, because the hardest thing I find is to kind of forecast how thick the cloud base might be. Yeah. So like last Friday, a friend of mine, another kind of photographer, reached out and said, the weather's going to be amazing on Friday. Have you got any time to take off? And we can go and see if we can get above it. And I kind of looked out the window in the morning and it looked like the cloud base was really quite high. You can sort of see some of the Lake District fells from this window where I'm sat now. And I could see that they're quite high up. So I started looking at various webcams and I thought, I could invest a lot of energy here into kind of going up this mountain and actually finding that when you get to the top, you're just stuck in pea soup and, you've kind of put all that effort in for nothing really. But then as it turns out, as you kind of like walking through the cloud, you can sort of see it starting to thin out and you look up and you can nearly see a little bit of blue kind of poking through. And that really fills you with a lot of excitement because you think, I think we can make this. I think actually the mountain's high enough to burst through it. And then it becomes this weird kind of, I don't know, I sort of associate it a little bit to like a masking tool in like Photoshop or Lightroom where it's very selective, only mountains that are over like 800 meters were poking out. So it's only the big ones that were kind of seen around you. And it was stunning. Yeah, it was a cracking day. And like I say, a lot of people would have kind of looked outside and gone, oh, I'm not going to go out today. So you end up just being there all by yourself on this little mountain island in the sea of clouds. It's beautiful.
I quickly realised I may not be able to add days to my life, but I was determined to add life to the remainder of my days. A quote from your story featured on the website Adventure Journal. It's a story I want to understand a lot more in a moment, but in terms of taking or making pictures, Nils, your photography actually goes back further than our discussion today, doesn't it? It goes back a bit further.
Yeah, I was sort of yesterday sort of preparing for this interview in a way, and I was thinking, when did I actually first pick up a camera? And it would have been my dad's Canon A1, sort of like an old SLR camera, one of the first to have like a program dial on it as well. So quite an important camera in the kind of history of technology, of imaging technology. Yeah. And he'd basically, shown me and my brother how to focus it using the kind of like the split screen and the sort of prism that you get within it. Yeah. Put a fresh film roll in there and send me and my brother out to go and have a little photo walk, if you like. So we went out for a little wander, and then obviously we were probably only about 8 or 10 years old and fired through the 36 exposures within a matter of seconds. But we had a little light room, or a little dark room, I should say. So we had a dark room in our house in Belgium, and he then showed us how to develop the photos, and it was mesmerizing. I remember, putting the photos into the chemical baths and, seeing that kind of image emerge through it in black and white. And it was magical. So that was, I suppose, my first kind of memory of photography, as it were. And then I didn't really do a lot with it until I started getting into, kind of like long distance treks through mountain ranges when I was about 18. And the first one I went on, I didn't actually have a camera, but when you're sort of living in the mountains for 10, 12, 14 days at a time, you really see that light changing, and you do find that you sort of end up above the clouds and you see all these different atmospheric conditions. And I thought, you know what, I really want to document this. I want to be able to look back at these amazing kind of conditions and, help to show people, inspire them to go and have the same adventure sort of thing. So yeah, I went and bought a little point and shoot camera, which had some, pretty decent reviews, and then used that for a number of years until I forgot it on a bus on one of my treks. And that kind of led me on to buying an SLR camera and kind of took it from there.
But as far as the sporting endeavours are concerned, you didn't start out with the cycling for going into the mountains. You were a mountain climber, weren't you?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. So before I moved to the Lake District, my main hobby was kind of rock climbing and mountaineering. So that was kind of like my favorite kind of pastime activity, if you like. But then when I moved to the north, having lived in the south for quite a while, I don't think I was quite prepared for the amount of rainfall you actually get around here. And I'd be, kind of going to these like rock gyms or like climbing gyms, training all winter, preparing myself for different projects in summer. And then on your day off, you'd find that you're just getting rained off crags. So I actually started turning to the bike a lot more, just because you can ride a bike in any weathers, really, whether it's kind of raining or snowing or dusty conditions. A bike is always fun. So I ended up using the bike a lot more. And I suppose one of those things, then you end up having kids and you end up just really time poor, don't you? So it's about choosing what you do in your free time. You can't do it all.
So have you stopped the climbing?
Yeah, I mean, I do still do a little bit now and then. I take my kids out to the wall from time to time, but because I've had so much abdominal surgery, like wearing a climbing harness can be a bit uncomfortable. So my work is still very closely related to the kind of climbing world. I work for like a distributor of outdoor equipment and climbing equipment. But yeah, I mean, climbing myself, I don't really tend to do a huge amount of it anymore now.
Although you need those muscles for when you're making these climbs, but we'll come to that in a moment. The latest chapter then of this story and your sort of rekindled relationship, if you like, with photography, it starts 5 years ago. I have this letter from you. It's one of those letters, Neil, so I receive in the mailbag that completely stopped me in my tracks. But take me through that time when things changed.
Yeah, so I suppose when I was 30 years old, I started getting what some people might call kind of like red flag symptoms, if you like, some kind of like pretty scary symptoms. And I went to my GP with those on a few occasions, and they kept dismissing me because I was, quite fit, young. I was getting out into the hills quite a lot, obviously looked like the kind of perfect example of a healthy human being. And they didn't think there was anything wrong with me. But I suppose you kind of know your own body, and I just wasn't convinced. And I pushed for like an investigative procedure, effectively called a colonoscopy, where they actually look to see if there's any kind of anything serious going on. And because of my age category, I was put onto a 3-month waiting list for that because I wasn't a high risk individual. Unfortunately, with my work, we all get private healthcare insurance, and I managed to get a colonoscopy done privately, and that's when I got diagnosed. So straight away they could actually see that there was a tumor in my large bowel, and I didn't really think much of it. I was sort of a bit sedated at the time, so I was very keen to go home. And the actual surgeon rang me up on my way home, and he said, "Are you sat down? Are you driving?" And I was like, "No, I'm driving home." And as soon as he asked that question, I knew this isn't good news. He wants me to be sat somewhere where it's safe to actually talk to me and kind of deliver this news. Yeah. So, he told me, you've got cancer. You need to go and you need to be seen by a multidisciplinary team, and you'll have to have some more scans as well to figure out exactly how severe it is and whether it's spread or not. So I had a CT scan shortly afterwards, and that showed up a couple of areas in the liver which didn't look quite right. I was quite quick to dismiss those as scar tissue from a previous mountain biking injury that I'd picked up, where I'd lacerated my liver. And I said, "Oh no, it'll be nothing. It'll just be scar tissue," because I was in hospital a couple of years ago with a lacerated liver. But then another scan revealed that it was actually disease as well. Those cells were overactive, so it's likely to be disease, and that then put it into what they call kind of stage 4 or, advanced cancer. And I didn't actually realize at that time until I saw my oncologist and started chemotherapy that meant it wasn't curable either. So she had to deliver that blow, and she kind of told me, generally speaking, people in your situation, they don't make it past 5 years from the point of diagnosis. The chances of getting past 5 years are very, very small. So yeah, that's when everything kind of turned upside down, really. And at the time, my wife was heavily pregnant with our second child. My little daughter at the time was just turned 2 when I was diagnosed. But my little boy was due to be born in November. And when I started chemotherapy, just trying to kind of like figure out the dose and stuff, initially it actually gave me a huge amount of side effects, and I ended up being hospitalized because of it. The sort of cycles were too severe. So my wife ended up being induced just to make sure that I could actually be there for the birth, because things were so unpredictable. I was having chemotherapy every 2 weeks. And yeah, I suppose because we were still trying to get into the routine of things, it could have easily meant that I wasn't there for the birth of my second child. So she ended up being induced. And that's kind of when I started thinking, you know what, we need to make sure that these really important memories that you do kind of experience, that they're documented somehow.
That's what you call the legacy, isn't it, for them?
Yeah, completely. Yeah. So that's difficult, because one of the biggest fears I had when I was diagnosed and they sort of told me you've got no more than 5 years left to live, is I sort of thought, well, I can't remember much from when I was younger than 7 years old. So, my little daughter was 2 at the time. At 5 years, she'd be 7. Yeah. Like, will she even remember me? And I thought I need to do something to create that legacy, to, actually show them who I am as an individual. And I thought through the means of photography, that would be a really kind of, quite a nice way of doing that
positive way to do it as well.
Positive way to kind of document, who their father was.
So this inspirational quote from you, Nils, I quickly realised you've probably realised I've really been taken by this quote, because I continually use it. But I quickly realised I may not be able to add days to my life, but I was determined to add life to the remainder of my days. At what point after that diagnosis then did that thought really strike home? Because it's a very positive and very affirming statement, the life statement that you made. Was it as quick as you suggested? You thought, well, let's do this thing then? No,
not at all. No. There's an annual mountain festival here in Kendal, which is a huge gathering of kind of like mountaineers and cyclists.
I know it. I know it. Yeah.
It's a brilliant festival. There's a night which I tend to always go to called the Bike Night, which is one of their biggest events. And there's a chap there called Andy McKenna, who had been diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis, quite a few years prior to that. Yeah. And he created a film called This Way Up, I seem to remember it's called. And it was all about how, despite his condition, he was still getting out and he was still riding bikes. And the actual film was really quite hard hitting. Like he'd be sort of shaking on his bike and, really finding it difficult to kind of control muscle movement, etc. But he was still smiling and he was still beaming. And this was kind of about 6 months after I started chemotherapy. And initially I thought, when I started, I'm not going to be riding bikes anymore, not for a while anyway, not until I'm kind of through this chapter. Seeing him talk about his adventures and how he'd kind of documented it, I thought, actually, I shouldn't let this illness dictate how I live my life. Yeah. I should still get out there and do what I love doing. And I really need to, kind of find a way that kind of works for me. So initially when I went out, I actually felt like, having always been really fit, I got an insight into what it must be like to be really, really unfit, riding up hills that I'd normally kind of breeze up. I was really struggling and my lungs were burning, my legs were burning. And I thought, crikey, I've bitten off more than I can chew here. But it was remarkable, kind of just building it up gradually, how much fitness I regained, even though I was on kind of like fortnightly chemotherapy cycles. So much so that my friends started to think that, the stuff I was getting in hospital was probably not chemotherapy, but just a really finely tuned doping regime. I could just...
Well, actually, you shamed me at that point, because you talk of this challenge. What was it that you said? You said, a reminder of what life must be like for the voluntarily unfit. And I thought, oh my God, Nils, you've just described me. But it is extraordinary effort. I mean, how do you deal with the extreme nature of the sport?
Initially, I nearly felt the need to kind of go and punish the body, really. I felt like my body had kind of let me down. So I was really determined to kind of go, right, I'm going to get on the turbo trainer every night, and I'm, going to go and really push myself and see what I'm actually capable of. And in hindsight, it's probably not the right thing to do, because your immune system is weakened by putting yourself through really kind of severe exercise like that. So actually listening to your body and not doing too much is really important. Yeah, it's surprising what you can do when you kind of, do things within reason and just kind of keep that regularity going and kind of building on, a good level of kind of base fitness that I had prior to diagnosis. I think the muscle memory kind of helped things to kind of come back pretty quickly. Crikey, now we're about, I think I've had seven rounds of surgery, 3 of which I've kind of been opened up like a suitcase, as I like to put it, kind of top to bottom. And they do take a bit more time to kind of recover from. You sort of, initially just kind of actually standing up and walking is really, really difficult. So I ended up through kind of like work connections, getting a bike which has got a bit of like electrical assistance. So it's like it's not like a full, what they call like a full fatty bike, sort of like fully, it doesn't kind of take over. It's not like you touch a pedal and off it flies. Yeah. But it gives you a little bit of assistance to make getting up hills a little bit easier. And it allows me to keep riding with, my friends who are still obviously really fit, really young, and we kind of ride at the same pace. So that's definitely made a big difference.
You do have this certain, if you don't mind me saying, gallows humour. I mean, in your posts, in Instagram in particular, I was having a good old read through your posts. That uncomfortable nod to our maker within your text, day 11 of the Tour de Cos. You wrote, lagging behind on the daily updates, so probably presumed dead by 80% of my followers. Is that a humour that you find has helped you?
Yeah. I suppose everybody's got a different coping strategy, with something like this. And for me, it was always important. I've always been somebody who smiles a lot, try to be quite upbeat about things. Trying to sort of see the funny side of things definitely helps. I mean, one of the chemotherapy agents that I get gives me quite a bad sort of skin rash. And I often joke that when I go to Asda now to buy some beers or something, I'm going to be ID'd because I just look like a pubescent little boy. So it's important to see the funny side of things. And I think it actually makes it a bit easier for people around you to be able to deal with the situation as well. I think if somebody asks you, oh, how are you today? And you always give them kind of like a bit of a negative answer, some people just won't know how to kind of deal with that. And, if you do that every time, they might not even ask you anymore after a while. So sometimes I just kind of keep my suffering to myself and, kind of put a brave face on it. It's not always easy. If you can sort of see the weird, funny side of things, it definitely helps to kind of get through those tougher times.
What an extraordinary lesson for your children as well. You talk about legacy.
Yeah. I mean, it's always difficult to obviously talk about children. And, like I kind of touched on before, one of my biggest fears was that they would never know their real dad. And the other thing that's kind of linked to that is, Lottie was only 2 when I was diagnosed, but actually my illness was probably there for quite a while before I was diagnosed. I mean, it was obviously advanced and it's a relatively kind of slow moving thing, or it certainly was initially. And it kind of sometimes worries me that actually the only dad they know now that they're a little bit older, is a dad who, every 2 weeks goes off to hospital and comes back looking pretty gaunt and looking pretty pale, obviously a little bit more fatigued. And it's not always easy to deal with that kind of youthful energy when actually you're feeling quite ropey. So I'm really conscious of the fact that, I want to leave something behind, whether it's photography or written word, that kind of makes them realise who I might have really been, if that makes sense. And that's part of the reason I've kind of started this whole project.
And Niels Armelinks returns shortly today, as in part 2, the photography and the biking all comes together. I did say, didn't I, before the interview, that the forest is particularly thick. It is. Just listen to the silence. Well, there's the silence bar, some forestry that seems to be going on in a wood further across from here. But listen. Practically nothing. Fantastic. A mention for our wonderful patrons and some news. To keep this show cooking and bubbling along as a quality podcast with all the work that you might expect from a radio outside broadcast. And by that, I don't just mean I bimble, as another mention for Mally Davis, as my friend Mally Davis would say. I don't just bimble along with the microphone and then just shove it up in the ether in the vague hope somebody may find it. No, you know me, quality is really important. Editing and writing and reading and researching and all those ings that we talked about last week, they take a lot of time to assemble and put in the right order. So it is a cast where your support, with a few cents and pennies and pounds, helps to keep it all here. From the price of one high street coffee per month, patrons help to finance this show. You really do. The time, the hosting, all that kind of thing. And to thank them, all patrons get to hear the extra more editions, which are a mix of personal photographic diary essays, which you can hear on the very easy to download Patreon app. More is out on a Saturday, and there are, or will be after tomorrow's More, 75 more episodes. Extra editions as my way to say thank you. Tomorrow, the photographic magic that's been hiding in my attic. Does everyone have a tin of old photos? It was an idea actually that came from one of our patrons, Andrew Hardacre in Hong Kong, as he introduced me to his father's tin that he now owns. It's become his property. So yes, I suspect you probably do own some. I mean, it'd be figurative tin. Maybe it'll be a box, or in my case, it's a suitcase of photographs. Also, the House of COVID. Yes, we did at last join that unenviable club in our household. That's probably why I've got the very end of this slightly sore throat. Neil, I didn't notice that. I thought you were just speaking in a much lower, deeper voiceover method. Actually, it came at a reasonably good time. The sore throat bit, that is, not the other bit, because I had a particular voiceover I needed to do that needed lots of gravitas. So I suspect a mixture of Omicron and having to do things with my voice that it wasn't quite ready for at the time has left me a little bit more gruff than I otherwise would have been. And also my brush with, this is a piece in the diary episode tomorrow, my brush with comedy stand-up at an open mic session. So, yeah. And also we talk about the work of Matt Black, who I have just found. And I feel I should have found him a long, long time ago. Anyway, go to the website and follow the link called Patreon if you'd like to be a patron. And, of course, be part of the More shows and our Zoom meetups that we do every single month. Before we have the next letter, which is from Bill Darby, which I'll read in a second, I've got another photograph here I'd like to make for my sketchbook of today's walks. But the trouble is isolating it. It's a beautiful, well, in terms of shape, it's a wonderful tree here, sort of really weaving itself in and out of other trees, which is in and of itself a bit of a problem because I can't isolate it properly from the trees around it. Let's have a go. I've lowered my shutter speed. I'm on a 60th. It's just, see, the trouble is with the sunshine going in, it's going to be a lot harder to isolate this tree in the fashion that I would like to. So I'm going to get a bit closer. 12mm on a Samyang 12mm on an X Pro 1 here. Means I've got quite, I can go quite wide. I'm in portrait orientation, as I said, right near the start of the show. Let's see if I can get something out of this. ISO 800, 60th, f5.6, and it will be, yeah, we'll see whether I've been able to isolate that tree enough. What you see sometimes with your eyes is dancing in front of you, but not necessarily photographically. Oh, sunshine, you'd have really helped me with that picture. So, Bill Darby, first off, he writes, thank you for such an inspiring podcast. Well, you're very welcome, Bill. Thank you. I can't recall how I found it in the first instance. Most likely fortuitous ineptitude, which kind of matches an email from last week, doesn't it? A letter from last week where it was said this was not the podcast you were looking for. But I'm glad you found it anyway. The guests, the format and the tone all resonate with me, and I don't miss an episode. Well, I'm pleased to hear it, and I'm flattered that you're there for every single one. By way of introduction, says Bill, I'm really just a guy with a camera making images. Same here, Bill. That sometimes even work out, he says. I shoot a bit of everything, but would best identify as a landscape photographer first and architectural photographer second. Some daft folks actually pay me to take pictures of buildings. But not much, mind you. Enough to keep up with the kit purchases, maybe. My images are lightly post-processed, if at all, as I prefer to make images versus sitting at the monitor. But back to the podcast. Listening, says Bill, has inspired me in new ways, changed the way I approach some subjects and topics, reinforced my decisions to keep it about the image and not the gear, and gotten me off my backside more than a couple of times during the past 18 months when venturing out seemed slightly indulgent. Keep it up, says Bill Darby. I'll put a link to Bill's website and Insta links on the show page. Bill or Captain Bill, as you were, sir, looking through your website, looks like you have a cockapoo as well. I saw that on your Insta. Though your one is very light coloured, if it is a cockapoo, of course. Compared to ours in colour, we've got a light brown one. You've got one that's practically white by the looks of it. Our barn is very hairy, a bit like a sponge. I would imagine, Bill, if you take yours out in the mud, it must come back an entirely different colour. But make sure you go look at Bill's architectural shots as well, because they really are very, very strong. Which in itself leads nicely to a quick mention for Matthias Fox, whose urban Photowalk shots are on the show page today, plus a bonus one actually featured on Wednesday in the Community 365. See, we're tying it all together here. As Matthias says, this part of the city of Dusseldorf features some modern architecture used by media companies, marketing agencies and law firms. Beautiful and so different to the amazing Foggy Walk pictures that we had a few weeks ago from you. Maybe a couple of months. These months go past so quickly. But they are beautiful and, yeah, very, very different to the other pictures you've sent in the past. Great. I really love them. And you certainly did that thing that we talk about on the show a lot. You looked up. And then one from Neil Swanson. Neil, I'm a bit behind episodes as my routine listening while I drive to and from work has been interrupted. I'm in catch-up mode. Don't worry, Neil. I'm not marking you down. You're not in detention. But Bert Stefani, he says, wow, can I relate to his feelings about work during and after being a pro? Bert Stefani, of course, was on the show a little while ago now, actually. I'm 65. Says Neil. Been shooting since I was 13 and was a professional for 23 of those years. So much of what I knew, what you had to know, isn't even a requirement anymore. Technically, that is. Vision still rules, and the ability to find it, know it, and bring it out for others to see, well, that's still paramount. When I was busy, I'd never pick up a camera for myself. Seems to be a theme this week, doesn't it? During the downtimes, I'd experiment, but to sustain both was tough. It's a tough gig being a sole proprietor of a creative business. So I appreciated the interview with him. Thank you very much, Neil. And yeah, it was a really interesting interview to listen to somebody who's very well respected, an ambassador for a camera brand. Somebody say that he just gave it all up. I mean, obviously the full episode will flesh that story out properly, but let's play a moment from that episode, shall we? I asked Bert, with all his experience and respect earned in the business, why he had decided to start making pictures for himself for a while, rather than for money.
For a couple of reasons, basically. Well, there's been a bit of a pandemic going on, which basically meant that all photography work dried up overnight. But to me, it's a bit more just like that was the thing that accelerated everything. But there's been things going on in the last couple of years in my life, in the industry, that made it actually quite a normal choice for me. So it's not like a surprise, although it took me a little bit of time to get my ego out of the way and admit that maybe it would have been good to step back a little bit, maybe for a while, to see why I do photography. I had a bit of a burnout. Well, I had a burnout like 4 or 5 years ago, doing what I love. And it made me look back on things, made me look take a really hard look on why am I doing this and what am I doing? And it made me realize that although I was a full-time photographer, I was not the full-time photographer I wanted to be.
Bert Stefani, what with that, and of course Jim Solo's words earlier, you'll be thinking we're suggesting that photography is not the easiest or best business to be in. Of course, that's not the case. I personally refer you back, Your Honour, to last week's show where I mentioned how I still wouldn't swap all the best pinstripe suits on Savile Row for my rather rocky freelance world at times. But of course, mentally, I think both Jim and Bert shared burnout as being the cause. And that's certainly something I'd be interested to hear more about from you, if it's something that you've been through creatively, if indeed you were shooting professionally, then decided that you wanted to, well, just make pictures for yourself for a while. It's a story that I'd be very interested to hear from you. Send your emails and keep sending me, please, your stories about photography, because the show would not be the Photowalk show without those letters. So send them to studio@photographydaily.show, and of course send your pictures into some of these fantastic images that you're sending in. Don't worry if you're not going to these incredible vistas, or maybe you don't get the opportunity to shoot like Matthias did in Dusseldorf with all that incredible architecture. Sometimes these are, well, they're like mine. They're these sketchbook images of your life as you take a walk, a wander where you live. And as I've said before, it's like a geographical diary, the images that you send in. So please keep sending them in with your stories, where you're walking, what you like to shoot, to studio@photographydaily.show. In a couple of weeks' time, the show will be really quite different. The retreat is happening on the Isle of Wight, which is an island, the very south tip of the UK. There are 5 of us, or there's 5 plus me, 6 of us. Count, Neil, count. Yeah, I do try. It wasn't my strong point. You know that. On this retreat. Really looking forward to it. We're walking, we're talking, we're exploring. We have a few, I'm going to loosely call them exercises, because a retreat is a retreat. It's not to make people feel like they have to come away and work. But we are going to do some things within this retreat to challenge us slightly as we go along. I'm really looking forward to it. And you will hear that retreat, because I'm going to make some recordings as we do our photo walks together. So hopefully you'll enjoy that too. I had a mail right at the start of the week from someone I'm going to call L, since you were keen to keep your name private, and that's fine. We've done that before, of course, on the show. Hi, Neil. Looking forward to hearing you talk with Nils, since you read his original email out. His story particularly affected me, since I've been going through a similar life event alongside a friend of mine who's become my inspiration since he was diagnosed with a degenerative disease. At the start, I often used to think that I would need to be there to support him, but life has a funny way of turning tables, and I find that he's the one that during the toughest times of his treatment is there for me and actually all his friends. Where he finds his strength, we simply don't know, but it makes every step of our hikes all the more precious. I read Neil's magazine article from the link on your show page, and it seems he's a special human and athlete too. Keep telling these stories. It's wonderful to hear the stories of those who are photography's known names, but equally these stories are just gold too. All the best, L. Well, thank you, El. I appreciate very much your letter, and it sounds to me like you perhaps are into your photography and hiking. If you feel you can, if it's appropriate, if there's pictures you can share, please send them in. I'd love to hear from you. So, second part of Neil's armor links. In part 1. Neil's set up for us really why time was important to capture photographically, and how we are where we are in this truly potent story of life. We're going to be a lot more photographic in this second part. And then, of course, usually at the end, I return to introduce a play-out song. But today is a little different going into the play-out song, which I think I've been quite particular choosing. I want Neil's words to be the ones that you hear going into that song and not mine. So I'll introduce the song by title. The song is called Memoirs, and it's by Cargan. And many of the play-out songs are very calm. They're very meditative, aren't they? And I try and match them with the mood or the story of the show. Not always, but often. Today couldn't be further from that vibe in terms of the pace of the song. I was listening, well, it was quite late last night actually, to the song I want to end today's show with. And I thought, and I want you to try and picture this, I thought of these incredible sights that he sees when he makes his way through the clouds and these cycle rides that he makes, making his photographs. So I thought of I can only describe it as magic of breaking through a cloud inversion, conquering these incredible heights, looking down into the blanket, that exalted feeling, the energy of the journey, the person that you have to be to push yourself to do the very best that you can, and then know that you still have to give a little bit more. So just hold on to those thoughts. When you hear the music at the play-out song that we play, just so that you have something else to enjoy making pictures by for a few more moments. But as that song comes on at the end of Neil's second part of the interview, just maybe cast your thoughts back to what I'm saying there about the energy that's required, about these fantastic sights, these amazing journeys and adventures that he takes. Here's part 2 of Neil's Armour Links.
Well, shall we talk about the kit and the cycling and the effort that you put into it, and these extraordinary some of the results you're getting of late, doing work and seeing your work published where you never thought you might before. But let's start with the kit. We don't talk a lot about kit, but I think it's very relevant when you're hauling stuff up and down mountains. You have to be travelling light. I mean, I've seen the places you go to.
Yeah, it's always a balance, isn't it? I mean, initially I was actually looking for the kind of most lightweight setup, and I ended up using a Fujifilm X-T30 for quite a while, because it's a nice and compact body, and the lenses are quite compact as well, and the results are incredible with that, as you know, obviously. But more recently I ended up moving to full frame, so I'm now using a Sony A7 III body, because actually, you know what, it's still pretty compact compared to what cameras used to be like, and you can get some pretty compact lenses with that as well. So I do try to kind of keep things to a minimum. Tend to use like a super wide angle lens, and then I'll often use like a fixed telephoto lens, like 70mm lens as well, to go alongside it, so it keeps things nice and lightweight, and it makes you move around a little bit more, I suppose.
But you're having to stop quite often, aren't you? The thrill of riding down the mountains. I'm surprised you even remember to stop as some of the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, it helps me though, to be fair. I mean, it's good to kind of break up a big ride. I think in the past we used to be guilty of just kind of, rattling top to bottom in one go, and kind of like just, riding that adrenaline wave. And nowadays it kind of slows you down a little bit, and it breaks up that journey. So I think photography really kind of helps with just slowing down a little bit and taking in your surroundings, and sometimes just sitting at the top of a climb and kind of catching your breath. I suppose in a way photography is just a bit of it's an excuse for me to hide behind, to make a bit of a stop halfway up a climb and kind of catch my breath when all my friends are still kind of fighting fit and just flying up the hill in front of me.
Have you managed to persuade those that are cycling with you to get into the photographic habit too?
Yeah, we've actually got a really, really strong kind of cycling / photographic community around here. So yeah, there's a lot of my friends are actually professional photographers or video makers, and when we go out into the hills, everybody kind of understands that, when there's incredible conditions, we've got to capitalize on that, and we make the most of it. So that's really good. And then some of my other friends, actually, I suppose it's quite nice to get some nice photos taken of you on your bike, and something that you can, put up on your wall. So they don't mind riding the same section over and over again, just until we quite get it right.
Well, I was interested in that. Do you have to sort of you come down and think, right, we got to go back up again to come down to get this shot again, which must be.
Yeah.
I would imagine it would be extremely frustrating, but not necessarily because you're that keen to get your shot.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just I just shout my commands and hope that they oblige and just run back up the hill. But it is important sometimes just to get those. Even just a body shape on a bike, if somebody looks, it's no different with skiing. You can come down a hill at the same speed, but some people look, well in control, and the body position on the skis looks just right, and it makes for a great photo. But then on in another photo, somebody's body position is slightly out, and it just looks like you're a little bit hesitant, and it just looks a little bit more out of control. So it's important to just get that just right as well as the composition of the frame, obviously.
Tell me about the opportunities that have come your way, the sponsorships, the articles, the things that you thought you wouldn't necessarily be doing that you are now.
Yeah, so I suppose I've always been kind of documenting my adventures on Instagram. I'm not massively active on Instagram, in fairness. I try to be a little bit more now, but it was probably about a year ago to the date now. We were on this dawn raid, what we call a dawn raid, which is effectively trying to get the best sunlight, at the crack of dawn, on one of the biggest mountains in the Lake District called Helvellyn. We had the most incredible conditions, and you literally couldn't take a bad picture. Like wherever you pointed a camera, the conditions were just incredible.
It looked amazing, yeah.
And that was picked up by a journalist who is writing on a freelance basis for effectively an adventure-orientated website. He'd seen the photos and said, "Oh, would you mind sending us a load of these photos and writing a story to go alongside it? This is a paid-for opportunity." And I thought, "Oh, wow, this has kind of come out of nowhere," and got a little bit more information off the back of it. And he hadn't actually kind of scrolled down much further on my Instagram page and hadn't kind of quite realized about the kind of cancer or the kind of illness element of my life. And, when he saw that, he said, "Well, you're more than welcome to kind of bring that into the story, but that's not what this is about, so you don't really have to." So I kind of touched on it a little bit in the story. And then when that got published, I had a huge amount of people kind of reaching out to me saying it's been hugely inspirational, and it's made them kind of look at their own lives. And even if they're fit and well, to go, well, actually, we need to make the best, or we need to make the most out of every day. We need to kind of like live life to the fullest. It kind of spurred me on to do more work like it to an extent. I mean, I've got it's a fairly strong story in its own right. So, magazines are quite keen to run something that's a little bit different. And I think particularly now, with everyone having kind of suffered through the last 2 years with, various lockdowns, etc., something that's maybe a little bit more positive despite the circumstances actually seems to resonate quite well with people. So, yeah, when I've kind of pitched the idea to a few publications, it's been pretty well received. And I mean, the issue I've got to an extent is you can't rewrite the story. You can only really write it once. So if I'm talking about, for example, getting out mountain biking, despite being on fortnightly chemotherapy cycles, you can't write the same story and send it to 10 different publications. So I was being very, very picky with who I reached out to initially, thinking, well, I'm going to start really, really high. And this particular publication called Sidetrack Magazine, they were really keen when they read the story. But then when I spoke to them, I said, "Oh, we'll probably run it online." And I ended up picking up the phone to the editor and kind of explaining the situation, because I said, well, the trouble I find with online, as much as it's got a huge amount of reach and it's going to touch a lot of people, it's not something that's physical. And I worry where, those kilobytes are going to go in 10 years' time, because really what I was really kind of aiming for is this nice kind of coffee table magazine, which features my story, which, again, my kids can pick up in 10 years' time, and it's something they can be proud of. Like, this is what my dad effectively shot and wrote, and it ended up in this magazine. So when I explained that, he said, "Well, let me go back and have another look, because I understand that you can't rewrite the story." And they rang me back about half an hour later and said, "Nils, I've dropped the ball. I don't know why we were thinking of even putting it online. It's definitely going in the magazine." So that's being published now in February. And things like that have been, huge for that kind of self-confidence. And it's just made me think as well, actually, I should do things beyond writing in magazines and maybe set something up to, something within the kind of bicycle community to inspire other people to find resilience within riding bikes. So hence the reason I've got that rider resilience page set up as well.
Another bit of kit arrived in your life not so long ago as well. Big Frenchie.
Big Frenchie, yeah. The big camper van. I was struggling for a name there. Big Frenchie is kind of what it became, because that's what it is.
Big Frenchie, I mean, it does what it says on the tin, really, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It's
unreliable French vehicle. Yeah,
well, you got rid of the van that I think is the ultimate, the VW, which is for all of us that yardstick of exploration, and you bought this huge thing.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, there's 4 of us now, and the trouble we always had with I say the trouble. It sounds. I mean, this is an absolute first world problem, but the issue we found with the Volkswagens is that you end up having to move the car seats around and then find a place for them to make that, seating space into a bed. And then you put the pop top up and, in the middle of winter, actually, it's pretty cold. Like, it's just a single skin tent on top of a vehicle, effectively. So even with the diesel heater, it wasn't all that pleasant. And then, through lockdown, when we couldn't travel anywhere, I mean, when I was diagnosed, my oncologist said, do everything that you want to do. And if you've got enough time, do it all again. So it was really important to try to kind of maximize on any kind of free time. And we put our savings into effectively just a panel van, which a friend of mine then converted to our spec. And it's something where we've got 2 double beds in like a bunk bed formation at the back, and we can just be really impulsive with it. We can just drive out if there's a nice sunset or something. It's always got tins of beans, pasta sauce in there ready to go, and it feels like a little micro adventure. I know that's a bit of a buzz phrase, but it's helped a lot throughout these last couple of years just to be impulsive and kind of make the most of the good times.
So next adventures, plans, the places you want to take the bike, Frenchie, the kids, your wife. Well, I'm assuming you'll go anywhere but cold water, because I did read your post about cold water aversion, which is something we share in that respect.
Absolutely. Last winter, my wife was going what they call wild swimming. Every week.
Bitter.
Yeah, absolutely. All the way through winter in Lake Windermere, and it's not for me.
Don't blame you. So what are the next adventures?
A couple of years ago, I was planning a big kind of alpine traverse on the mountain bike. So I'd be going to the Bavarian Alps, a place called Berchtesgaden, and then the idea would be to ride across from there to Lake Garda. So literally like a north to south journey.
Beautiful.
Through the mountains.
Beautiful.
And then when we were meant to go, I ended up having emergency surgery, which kind of ruled it out. But that's when kind of everything kind of locked down as well that summer, and we weren't allowed to travel anyway. So I still kind of feel like I'm owed that, if that makes sense. Yeah. But it's a little bit tricky now, because with the last few rounds of surgery that I've had, I'm what they call like an ostomate now. So I've got a bag like a stoma, and that makes obviously traveling by bike a little bit more tricky, because it's just something else that you kind of need to worry about. Also, I'm missing a fairly big chunk of bowel, which makes hydration a lot more difficult. So I'd still love to do it, but I think I might just have to tweak the trip a little bit accordingly, and maybe actually stay in huts a little bit more than I was originally planning on doing. So one of the things that we're potentially looking at now is to do a tour of Mont Blanc on the mountain bikes, where that would probably only take about 3 or 4 days, and to actually stay in mountain huts as opposed to kind of wild camping our way around. So that'd be a summer plan. The only caveat with that is I find it really difficult to plan too far in advance. I mean, you kind of end up getting really excited about something, and then if for whatever reason you can't go, it's quite hard hitting. If for whatever reason life says, you're not going out to the Alps this year once again. So I tend to only plan a couple of months in advance at any one time. So we're going on a ski holiday in February. We're really keen skiers, myself and Laura, my wife. We met out in the Alps. So we're taking our kids out to the Alps for the first time, which is really exciting.
Fantastic.
But then afterwards...
You're a boarder, aren't you? Are you a boarder or a skier? Or both?
Yes. I skied up until the age of about 13, and I switched to snowboarding. But now that we want to teach our kids, I'm probably going to revert back to skiing. Right. It'll just be a lot easier to, shuffle around with them, as opposed to being on a snowboard and having to be kind of side on to them, trying to manage them. Really keen to teach them to ski first before kind of progressing from that. So yeah, that's one thing. And then I've got a story in the pipeline for a magazine called Single Track Magazine, which is going to be a multi-day adventure up in Scotland, probably the Cairngorms. And that's going to be about, what you can actually do with a stoma, because there's a lot of people who've got stomas but for reasons outside of cancer, for example, irritable bowel syndrome, etc. So yeah, really want to kind of inspire people that actually, even with some pretty severe conditions, and effectively it's a disability, you can still have multi-day adventures on the bike and kind of document that. And then further down, I mean, I want to spend more time up in Scotland really, because we're quite restricted in terms of where we can actually ride bikes. You shouldn't really ride footpaths, obviously, stick to bridleways, but they can be pretty sparse around here in the Lake District, whereas in Scotland, with the right to roam, any path is good to go, really, so you can document your adventures a lot more.
I'm not sure you can answer this question, and I'm hoping you might think, oh, I know the one. What's the picture that you've made, and this will be a so far, actually, that encapsulates this journey?
Yeah, that is a difficult one, really. It'd probably be a selection. I mean, there's a few, obviously, there's an image which seemed to resonate with a lot of people from that Helvellyn Dawn raid about a year ago. Yeah. And that's kind of been, I suppose that's a start to where I am now in my kind of, I'm not even going to call it a photography career, because it's very much like a side project of mine, if you like, outside my kind of daily job. But more recently with, for example, this article that I've written for Sidetrack magazine, I shot everything myself because I felt the best way to kind of really tell this story is through my own lens, and that added a layer of complexity, because, when I was saying earlier about having to make people redo the same little bit of trail, I was doing this with a tripod with a self-release on like burst shoot setting of the camera. And you'd set it up. It'd be about kind of 30, 40 meters away. And you'd hit the shutter button on your handlebars. I'd sort of like cable tie this remote release to my handlebars. And you're trying to ride technical terrain whilst pressing this button. I'm not the best multitasker at the best of times. To then put your bike down, run up the hill, have a look, only to find that actually you didn't press the button properly and you didn't take a single shot, and you've got to do it again. So the amount of effort that went into those shots, even though they're probably not my best shots because you're restricted by what you can do with a tripod, they kind of mean a lot to me. It's kind of like me telling my own story and the suffering that went on behind the scenes. I couldn't even put into words, really. You definitely have to work hard for those shots.
Nils, we talk often about mindfulness, and it's something you mentioned in your letter to me. That's sort of the solace of photography, and that quiet time, and being able to concentrate on something other than the outside world. What does it mean to you, photography?
I suppose photography is a really good way to kind of slow down. And I mean, when I was diagnosed, and I sort of started to think, heck, if I've only got 5 more years on this planet, I don't really want to kind of waste my time staring at a little phone screen, which, us millennials find ourselves doing all the time. And I thought, actually photography is a great way to kind of like look up and look around and take in your surroundings, but also notice the small kind of little nuances a little bit more, like, textures, lines, shadows, light, all of that sort of stuff. And I suppose that the kind of flip side to it is that when you focus so much on photography and getting a particular shot, I don't find I have the kind of mental real estate to focus on anything else. So it stops me from worrying about, maybe an upcoming scan or scan results, or, perhaps like the longer term future, because I'm just in the moment. I'm focusing on kind of like, what's the shot I'm trying to get? What's the light going to do? What else can we shoot? How can we make this more interesting? And it really kind of allows me to switch off. It's huge. The other thing which I did quite soon after being diagnosed is that I tried to look up, is there a way to slow down time? And that sounds bizarre, because obviously a second is a second. It's that's just a metric. But by actually engaging your brain and taking in more and kind of giving yourself new experiences, you do find that time has a degree of elasticity to it. So it seems to take a bit longer. And I suppose a good analogy is when you're driving out somewhere new, that journey out there seems to take forever. And on the way back, it's over within seconds. And it's just because you're taking in all these new sights and seeing all these new things. And I think, kind of like relating that to photography, when you're opening your mind and you're kind of like looking at the little details of the world around you, and you're actually making your brain work a little bit and process more, it does seem like time slows down a little bit. And in my situation, that's obviously really rather crucial.
Sun rays on my skin, where will I be hiding when the storm comes in? Who is my disguise? I have lost my memories. Will they come back? by a thread, and I am giving in. Everything is cold, and now my fingertips turn blue. Tell me you can hear me when my lips talk to you. Tell me you can hear me when my lips talk to you. When my lips talk to you. When my lips talk to you. Waiting for the water. Will they come back? I'm thinking of the past. It's frozen in the ice.
Music of Carbon. My thanks to Nils Armerlinks, and I shall share his links and some pictures on the show page today. Thank you also to Jim Solos, Bert Stefani and Adrian Villa. My special patrons, see you tomorrow morning on The More Show on the Patreon channel, where I'll be asking if everyone has a tin of pictures that unlocks their photographic history. I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.